My written speech is going to be too long. I think the key issue here today is sustainable, inclusive business. We in private sector, and I talk about East Africa, we're in East Africa, we're in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Madagascar now, and going all across Africa as a business. The key question is, the business people actually ask, why should I be sustainable? What's in it for me? I think the key question would be going back to saying, what is sustainability? We probably need to address the issue. If I ask all of you to address what does sustainability mean, probably we'll get about 10 or 20 different answers. Because this is being debated a lot, sustainability, sustainability. I think in our context here, in Kenya, in East Africa, sustainability would be three things. First of all, when you talk about the triple bottom line and you talk about profits, business is in this area to make business and in order to add shareholder value. That was the original discussion. But if it doesn't make profits, will that business be sustainable? And I put it to even the civil society, right? The people in civil society who come and become activists, if they were not getting a salary, would they still be sustainable? Would they still be doing what they're doing? Same thing in business. If you got into employment and you're employing 500 people, 1,000. We employ 6,500 people right now across East Africa. And we're actually adding 2,000 more. Is that sustainable? If we cannot pay the salaries end of the month, is that going to be sustainable? So, definitions of sustainability. And I think this is where we need to start from and say, sustainability means, yes, you make some money, which is beyond your cost. You make some profits. At the same time, you look at how you do the business. Doing the business in a way which is sustainable to the environment. So we talk about planet, and planet is about the environment. And then people. I think people means inclusive, so that everybody's put together, and really, sustainability can also mean creating more employment, generating more incomes. Because in Kenya, the rule is, if you employ one person, you've got 10 more people who are getting food on their tables. That's the ratio that goes out. So I think creating employment is important. However, I think this whole notion of why should I be sustainable in a Kenyan context? Should I be sustainable or should I be competitive? And the issue of competitiveness we always talk about at KEPSA, or even any business discussion we have, is we need to be competitive. So, whom do we compare with in Kenya? We used to compare with Europe, we used to compare with UK, we used to compare with the Netherlands. Nowadays we compare with Chindia. Chindia is China and India put together. And saying, fine, are we really sustainable against them? Because their costs are coming down much, much lower. And if you look at this whole context and saying, fine, China itself was not sustainable till now in terms of the environment or in anything else. It was more about cost competitiveness. I was at a conference in China recently and they said, our cost of labor has gone to $460 per person per month. And you in Kenya, you're at $120 per month salary. Ethiopia was at $50 and still is at $50 per month per capita income. Now what does that do? That makes Ethiopia far more competitive against China. And therefore China is now saying, we are relocating a lot of our industries into Ethiopia because of the low labor cost. Which industries are transferring? The ones that are labor intensive. Now, they're also looking at sustainability because they say in the long run, we will not be sustainable and be competitive in our cheaper goods. In order to do that, they're saying we will produce now in Africa. The same thing in the flower industry. I think Netherlands, very strong example. Netherlands, the greenhouses was fantastic in flowers. Kenya has now become a competitor or a complementer, let's put it this way, because a lot of our flowers actually go into Holland. And Kenya's cost is much more cheaper. If you look at it from a per square foot, or was it a per square meter basis, is $100 or 100 euros in Holland, whereas here, it's only $35. Why? Because we've got the sun. We're on the equator. So we've got the sun, which is free. We don't pay for it. You use the sun in the greenhouses. You don't have to use energy. And there's a lot more sustainability available here. Low labor cost. All that put together, despite us going by air from here into Holland. So when we talk about sustainability, I think we need to address this issue of being competitive. A lot of industries talk about, oh, but you know, if I become sustainable, I won't have a livelihood, I may not remain competitive. I put it to you that we have done it ourselves as a company. Not because it's government regulation, not because government is saying you must do X, Y, Z. And this is where the Y comes in from government. Civil society, government, private sector. When we talk about this, we need to do the 4 Ps here, which is the people, public, private partnerships. This is how we're going to become more and more sustainable. Why? Because the old habit of civil society coming and saying, let's knock on the private sector because these are all profiteers. So we need to put them down and push them down and crush them. And government saying, we will now live by regulations which are now very prohibitive, rule of the thumb, and you know, the stick that Jan Peter got, you use that stick to say, fine, harm people back and forth and say, stop, you can't do this. We need to do what he said, partnerships. A partnership between government, private sector, and civil society and say, guys, let's look at solutions for this problem. We're right now going through a big issue right now in Kenya. One is the floods, of course, that's the hottest thing right now. We had a famine, and we just come out of a famine and a dry period, or a drought, as they call it. And now we've got excessive rains. In both places, we didn't know what to do. Today, excess run of water. In the past, it was more about no water. And we haven't done any got solutions yet. But the other menace right now we're talking about is plastics. And with governments coming out and saying, let's just ban all plastics. Ban it because it's very criminal. It's worse than cocaine or drugs. And the government solution is ban, ban, ban. I hope the minister was here today, but if he was here, I would have talked to him straight. Banning is not the solution. I think recycling, reusing is the solution. Now, how many recyclers in the room here right now? 3, 4. Recycling, 5, 6. So there's a lot of recyclers in the room right now. And there are many more aspiring to be recyclers in this country. Which means that the circular economy that Karen was talking about can be done in Kenya too. Therefore becoming more sustainable rather than saying we've got to ban it all. So civil society activists come in and say ban it. I was at a UN conference in UNEP in December this year. It was a big issue about banning plastics worldwide. And I went and spoke there and I said, if we ban plastics, what's the solution? I said, paper bags. Paper bags as trees. We're cutting trees. And here we're talking about, let's go plant more seedlings, let's go plant more trees. The price of paper in Kenya has gone 3 times. It's gone up 3 times after the plastic bags were banned. Now we're talking about banning all that stuff. And I think this is where partnerships. Coming back and saying, let's look at the problem. If the problem is disposal into the environment, plastics is not a bad thing, but it's disposal into an environment where somebody takes it and throws it into the environment and that's it. Let's take responsibility as citizens, as companies, as corporates, as people of East Africa and say, fine, we're going to make sure we recycle it. So the way we throw it away is going to be responsible. The way we dispose of it and send it to recycling is going to be responsible. This is what sustainability would be. Then it creates a business for these recyclers. It actually makes sense to say, you've got a supply chain here. And if we do it from every single household, there's a saying that if every single citizen of the world kept their front yard and the backyard clean, the world would be a clean place altogether. So what's not happening? Traditionally, the role has been, I take garbage, I throw it out, and I tell the council. There's only one person of the council here, right? County council. And I say the county council's duty is to pick that rubbish and take it away to the dump yard. Not my responsibility. My responsibility, I throw it out there. Their responsibility to look at that because I'm paying them taxes. This is where it's got to change, and this is what we need to change totally and say, fine, ni wajibu wetu. In Swahili we say ni wajibu wetu. In English we say it's our responsibility. If we take it as our responsibility and say, we, the people, are going to take responsibility for these menaces, whether it is environment, whether it's water. I think when you talk about 1 kilo of meat and talking about 10,000 odd liters, I think that's striking. Although I'm vegetarian, I'm a bit proud to publish that all over and say, look, this is what it is. The realization of this, the awareness creation, I think this is where the giveaway or the takeaway from this conference should be, let's make people aware of the waste that we're actually producing. So, I think the new mindset that's required, as talked about, is to say, let us all take responsibility collectively. Let us all change the way we do things in terms of, it's a wish to, I want to. be environment friendly. I want to be inclusive. I want to help my fellow people, and let's find solutions. If that mindset is not there, and if it's just big stick and say, fine, do this, do that, based on solutions found out by one Gazette notice or one implementation, it's not going to work. It's not going to be sustainable because today we have no alternative. The mom bogas cannot supply their products, their fresh foods in paper bags. The plastic bottles that we have today, yes, menace. Let's go to the straws. Let's go to that route. But how many people can afford glass? And then the glass industry. So when we look at this, let's look at circular notions of recycling, sustainable solutions. At the same time, I think code of ethics. Very important thing is the code of ethics. Kenya now has a very strong anti-bribery act and a corruption law. Can we all take responsibility and say, yes, we will now make sure we will not flout this law? Every single corporate in private sector needs to have a very clear set of code of ethics. If you want an example, you can download it from our company. It's www.bidcoafrica.com. And you've got a whole set of code of ethics there, which you can live by in line with the new Bribery Act, with all that stuff put together, so that you actually incorporate inclusiveness and sustainability in your code. It includes everything about harassment, sexual harassment, everything else in there, because that is the way we need to work. Now, a lot of us thought in Africa that this is a European notion, or it's a Western notion, and that's being brought about to us from there. I think it applies to us here too, and sooner or later, we're going to have it here. So when we talk about future-proofing, and I think this is where we talk about the future-proofing, we talk about artificial intelligence, robotics, everything else. The workforce will be robotic. And if that happens, what are we going to do to our inclusiveness? What are we going to do about our labor? So I think the thing is, we've got to get these universities creating a lot more graduates. We're giving laptops to our kids at Standard 1. Now, they're not going to go and become a farmer. They're going to say, I want to do agribusiness. They want to do other things in digital economies. And I think the scope there is massive, as long as we make it sustainable. We talked about going paperless, and paperless was very sustainable, right? Go digital. I think this was a fantastic exercise we did on the Mentor, whatever it was. It was really good. We get surveys done. Can we reduce the paper? If that's done, we could do a lot more. Can we remove paper bags? Can we have much more of digital stuff going across? Kenya is ready for this. I think we have a lot of digital economies here. We've got the Silicon Savannah here, which we can do a lot more. However, I think there's one more issue that is there. Am I doing this because it's a government law? Or am I doing sustainability because I wish to and I want to be sustainable and I want to do it in the right manner? This mindset, if it changes to say, I want to do it, and therefore, when there's a fork on the road that I can take a cheaper route which is non-sustainable and get my profits there, and the other one is longer run, which one do I go for? Certifications, and I talk about certifications. We've got all the ISO 9000, ISO 14000, ISO 18000, ISO 22000 as a company. We've got all the certifications. We've got the Global Compact. We're signatories to it. We now have the only one in Africa, which is the sustainably, is it PAS 90 or something from UK. We've got sustainability practices everywhere in place. However, the consumer does not pay extra for it. So this is a big issue that people think that if I do all these sustainable practices, my customer will pay more for it. No. They will not pay more for it. They will not give you extra credit to say, okay, I'll buy your product because you are running sustainable practices. So this is another argument that I have with a lot of people who say, if we do all this, it costs us money to do ISO and all these other things, but consumer's not going to pay extra. I need to be competitive. This is what I call the fork on the road. Do you wish to do it? Or are you going to say, look, I could do it without that, and I can run it the way I want it? For future-proofing, the sustainable method is get your standards in place, become globally world-class, and therefore, for the 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you will be sustainable. We had this issue on our flower farms where we actually now have zero wastage of water going out. We recycle everything. We even recycle our leaves, all the leaves and everything else we get out. We make that into fertilizer on the farm. In Uganda, we have a plantation. We have a palm oil plantation, which is about 30,000 acres. There is zero wastage there. Nothing goes to waste. Everything is recycled and reused. Now, that could be done only because we wish to do it. It's an expensive thing in the start. It's a capital expenditure. But later on, it becomes competitive because it's sustainable in the long run. And I believe that consumers are going to go that route to say, I want to buy from sustainable people. Maybe not yet. Maybe not in East Africa yet. But I think it's going to go there. We've got to be prepared for that to say, fine, here we are. The reason I say this is because a lot of us still talk about we're in the third world. We don't get affected by these things. I'm telling you openly right now, if you go and look at your Google right now, what you've got on Google, if an Apple iPhone is launched in New York now, the Kenyan wants it tomorrow. If our supply chains are not going to be levelized, if we're not going to be levelized in terms of thinking and in terms of the way we do business, I think we're going to be taken over quite soon. Therefore, to be sustainable, we've got to make sure we all work together as partnerships, government, private sector, and civil society. And we must not be exclusive of each other. We must not say, oh yeah, when I talk to civil society, they say, oh no, you stay away, you're private sector. We are not for profits, and we need to be our activists. I think that's time, the time for that has gone. It needs to say, let's look at a solution, let's look at the problems and look for solutions together. And this is why the workshops today probably are going to be very important to get your sustainable and inclusive practices so that the do-how and the know-how that does exist in some pockets is then proliferated to everybody as a sharing economy. I think you talked about sharing economy. We need to start sharing these best practices all around and then get our African next practices of how we do business here. Because a lot of us complain and say, oh, you know, we're at the bottom of the pyramid, we've got more people there, and we're not in the middle, and we're not at the upper class. But the bottom is only going to come up. It's not going to go lower. And therefore, we have a responsibility to bring that up and say, fine, let's raise our standards. Let's make sure that we adopt international standards. If we can do that, we will leapfrog. And I say this openly here. We will leapfrog the West and go become bigger and better, rather than go through the learning curve that the West has gone through. They have gone through many years of turmoil. I mean, Mr. Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister, you've gone through a lot of issues, I'm sure. But here, we could leapfrog to the latest now and say, fine, here we go, adopt the latest, be at the forefront. The digital economy is talked about as a new industry 4.0. I think that's the new industry that's going to take over. We are ready here. We've got bandwidth, we've got availability, we've got gadgets, we've got nothing short. We have the best of human capital. Let's put it to good use and really ensure that we put sustainable and inclusive business practices as a DNA of what we do. The Big Four we talk about right now, it's the theme in Kenya, the Big Four. It's about manufacturing, agribusiness, it's about universal healthcare, and it's about affordable housing. 4 big areas where the government's thrust is fully on it. The President pronounced it. Every government ministry is now aligning itself to it and saying, fine, let's do something about that. If all of this was made to be sustainable, if all of this was made to be really innovative in the way it's done, affordable housing will be able to do that without using a lot more electricity and all that stuff, and using the sunshine. So I think a lot of new innovations can be done here. There's an opportunity for us to change and really inculcate SIB or the practices that we have here in the Big Four. And I think this is an opportunity that, Carol, I think this is where we can discuss with everybody and say, fine, come up with solutions. The time has gone for a lot of ideas. Ideas are like, okay, I've got an idea here, and then we'll look at it. And it's got intention, good intention. It's now time for getting the intention, the actions, concrete proposals, and results. If we don't do that, we will be actually zero, we'll stay where we are. So I think with that, all I want to say is, it is our responsibility collectively, as government, private sector, civil society, or people, to come together and say, fine, let's make this happen. With that, I want to wish you a very good workshop, and I think let's take the responsibility in our own hands. To all those recyclers, I wish you luck, because I think that's a big theme right now, and we can actually make a big difference. Lastly, the tree planting. A lot of us go and say, we're planting seedlings. Let's take these seedlings, let's go plant them. To make it sustainable, I would rather put a 5-year looking after those plants, looking after those seedlings, making sure that they grow into a tree. Once it's a tree and it's got a trunk, it will then grow on its own. But that first 5 years, very critical. I've seen plantations done, a very nice popularity thing done for what I call cosmetic social responsibility, and then forgotten, no budget, because there's no sustainability on it. And then you see all people driving over it and all that stuff. Let's make it sustainable and say, fine. If the government needs to provide and say, we give you a tax incentive for every tree that you grow in 5 years' time. After 5 years, if the tree is there, we'll earmark the trunk and say, here's the tax incentive. I think this would work very well. So I just want to end with that to say, let's stop planting seedlings, let's go grow trees. Thank you very much.